Police officer arrested a black teenager in a pharmacy without realizing she was his boss's daughter. Big mistake. Get your hands off my arm, you animal. Kesha's voice echoed through the pharmacy as Officer Thompson pushed her against the medicine shelf. Bottles of syrup fell to the floor, shattering into pieces that cut through the tense silence of the store. The 17-year-old had only come in to buy ibuprofen for her grandmother, but now she was being handcuffed like a common criminal. Her brown eyes flashed with indignation as dozens of customers recorded the scene on their cell phones, witnessing yet another case of police abuse against a young black woman. "Shut up, girl. You know damn well why you're being arrested," Thompson growled, tightening the handcuffs with unnecessary force. At 34, he had accumulated 12 years of exemplary service in the Chicago police force, specializing in patrolling neighborhoods where he could exercise his authority without too many questions. What Thompson didn't know was that Kesha Williams wasn't just another black teenager to be intimidated. She was the daughter of Captain Michael Williams, head of District 15 and Thompson's direct superior for 3 years. More importantly, she had inherited her father's strategic intelligence and her mother's iron determination, a retired federal prosecutor. "Officer Thompson," Kesha said with a calmness that disturbed some observers. "Are you sure you want to continue with this?" Her voice carried no fear, only an almost scientific curiosity about how far he was willing to go, threatening a police officer now. "That's another crime on your record, princess." Thompson smiled cruelly, reveling in what he believed to be total control of the situation. The pharmacist tried to intervene. "Officer, I can confirm that she only bought basic medications. There was nothing suspicious." "Shut up and get back to work." Thompson cut him off sharply, turning to drag Kesha toward the exit. But as they walked, something about the girl's behavior began to bother some of the people present. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't show the typical despair of someone being unjustly arrested. Instead, her eyes studied Thompson with the precision of someone cataloging every word, every action, every violation of protocol. "My father always taught me that there are two kinds of police officers," Kesha murmured, just loud enough for Thompson to hear. "Those who protect and serve, and those who abuse their badge to compensate for their own insecurities." Thompson stopped abruptly, turning to face her. "Your father? Let me guess, another criminal you're trying to protect." There, in that moment of utter arrogance, Thompson sealed his own fate. Because if he knew who Kesha's father was, he would have realized he was making the biggest mistake of his police career. If this story of injustice and reversal is stirring you up, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happens when Thompson discovers Kesha's true identity will completely rewrite the rules of the game. Thompson's patrol car cut through Chicago traffic with its sirens blaring, more for show than out of necessity. In the back seat, Kesha remained silent, watching through the metal bars as pedestrians stopped to record the scene of yet another black teenager being transported like a criminal. "I bet your father will be proud when he finds out his little girl has become a drug dealer," Thompson laughed, adjusting the rearview mirror to watch Kesha's reaction. "Or does he already know? Maybe it's a family business." Kesha didn't respond, but her eyes studied every word, every gesture. At 17, she had grown up hearing stories from her father about corrupt, racist, and incompetent police officers. Captain Williams always emphasized that there were two categories of problematic officers: those who were genuinely evil and those who were simply too stupid to realize their own incompetence. Thompson clearly belonged to the second category. The 15th precinct was bustling with the typical activity of a Thursday afternoon. Officers filled out reports, criminals awaited processing, and desperate families tried to get information about their arrested relatives. Thompson led Kesha down the main hallway like a trophy, greeting colleagues who congratulated him on the good arrest. "Another one for the stats, Thompson. Keep it up and you might get that promotion," commented Officer Davis, giving him a thumbs up as he watched Kesha being pushed toward the holding cells. What none of them noticed was Kesha's expression changing subtly. She knew that hallway, those voices, even the specific smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. She had grown up visiting this place on weekends when she accompanied her father on extra jobs. She knew every officer by name, knew who had children, who was getting divorced, who was struggling with addiction, and they all knew her. The first crack in Thompson's reality appeared when Officer Martinez looked up from her desk and frowned. "Thompson, why are you?" she began to ask, but he cut her off abruptly. "Just processing another suspected trafficker." "No big deal," Thompson replied, pushing Kesha more quickly down the hallway. Martinez continued to watch, her confusion growing. There was something familiar about that girl, something she couldn't quite put her finger on, but it bothered her deeply. In the processing room, Thompson began filling out the paperwork with sadistic enthusiasm. Full name, he demanded without looking up from the form. Kesha Williams, she replied calmly. Thompson paused for a split second. Williams was a common surname. Nothing that should concern him. Address: 1247 Oak Street, apartment 15B. Kesha lied deliberately, providing the address of the housing complex across town. She wasn't ready to reveal that she lived in the most exclusive area of Chicago in a house Thompson could never afford on his salary. What she was really doing was buying time. Every minute that passed without Thompson discovering her true identity was another minute for him to dig his own professional grave. Parents' occupation. My mother works in the judicial system. My father, Kesha paused deliberately, also works in the criminal justice system. Thompson laughed sarcastically. Let me guess. Public defender, social worker, people who protect crooks like you. Kesha smiled for the first time since her arrest. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something like that. As Thompson continued filling out forms, completely absorbed in his fantasy of police competence, he didn't notice that the room was gradually filling with other officers. Martinez had discreetly alerted colleagues about his suspicions, and now half a dozen officers watched the scene with growing discomfort. Officer Henderson, a 20-year veteran who had trained Captain Williams himself decades ago, approached cautiously. Thompson, can I talk to you for a minute? I'm busy processing an important arrest, Thompson replied without looking up. The girl was caught red-handed buying drugs. Drugs? Henderson asked, his voice thick with skepticism. What kind of drugs? Thompson hesitated, realizing he hadn't actually found any illicit substances. Well, she was acting suspiciously. Typical user behavior. You know how it is. The pathetic explanation echoed through the room in awkward silence. Several officers exchanged glances, beginning to realize that they were witnessing something that could end very badly for everyone involved. Kesha watched everything with the patience of someone who had learned strategy since childhood. Her father always said that the best cops knew when to talk and when to listen. The worst cops, like Thompson, never stopped to listen. Just then, the door to the room opened and Sergeant Rodriguez entered, carrying a cup of coffee and a stack of reports. His eyes immediately found Kesha and his expression changed from confusion to alarm in a matter of seconds. Thompson, Rodriguez said slowly. I need to talk to you now. But Thompson was so lost in his own arrogance that he didn't even notice the urgency in his superior's voice. Can you wait 5 minutes? I'm almost done here. Rodriguez glanced at Kesha, who confirmed her identity with an almost imperceptible nod. The sergeant closed his eyes for a moment as if calculating exactly how big the disaster about to explode would be. Thompson Rodriguez repeated this time with undeniable authority. Stop what you're doing and come with me now. It was at that moment that Kesha realized the first domino was about to fall. Every officer in the room was beginning to understand that something was terribly wrong. But Thompson remained completely oblivious to the abyss opening up before him. What that arrogant cop couldn't see was that every insult, every humiliation, every moment of unnecessary cruelty was being catalogued by someone who grew up understanding exactly how the system worked and how it could be used against those who abused it. Sergeant Rodriguez pulled Thompson into the hallway with an urgency that brooked no argument. I need to talk to you about this arrest right now. Thompson followed him reluctantly, annoyed at being interrupted during what he considered his moment of professional glory. Rodriguez, I'm in the middle of an important prosecution. The girl is clearly a potential drug dealer. Thompson, listen to me very carefully, Rodriguez whispered, looking around to make sure there were no other officers nearby. Do you have any idea who that girl is? Some criminal who tried to fool me with stories about her parents working in the judicial system, Thompson replied dismissively. She probably made it all up to try to get out of jail. Rodriguez closed his eyes for a moment, mentally calculating how explosive the scandal would be when the truth came out. Thompson, you need to release this girl immediately and pray she doesn't sue you in the department. Are you crazy? I have evidence of suspicious behavior. She was acting strangely at the pharmacy, studying medications for too long. Any competent officer would have done the same thing. While the two argued in the hallway, Kesha remained alone in the processing room, but she was far from helpless. Her eyes studied every detail of the familiar environment, the location of the security cameras, the documentation protocols hanging on the wall, even the internal communication system she had known since childhood. Discreetly, she watched Thompson through the glass window, noting how he gestured aggressively during his conversation with Rodriguez. Each movement revealed more about his unstable personality and tendency to escalate conflicts, exactly the kind of behavior her father had taught her to identify in problematic officers. It was then that Kesha made her first strategic decision. Using her intimate knowledge of police station procedures, she knew that Thompson would be required to allow a phone call within the next 15 minutes. But instead of calling a lawyer or relative like any frightened teenager would, Kesha had a much smarter plan. Thompson returned to the room, his face red with frustration, clearly irritated by Rodriguez's unnecessary interference. Where were we? Oh, yes. Your legal rights. You are entitled to a phone call. Thank you, officer, Kesha replied calmly, accepting the phone he offered her. Her fingers dialed a number she knew by heart, but it wasn't the one Thompson expected. Internal Affairs. Detective Morrison speaking. Thompson frowned. Most criminals called lawyers, family, or friends. Why would a teenager be contacting Internal Affairs? Detective Morrison. My name is Kesha Williams. I would like to report a serious breach of protocol involving arrest without probable cause and possible misconduct by an officer. The voice on the other end of the line immediately shifted from professional to genuinely interested. Go ahead, Miss Williams. Kesha watched Thompson out of the corner of her eye as she spoke, noticing how his expression began to shift from confidence to uncertainty. Officer Thompson arrested me at a pharmacy for suspicious behavior that consisted solely of reading medication labels. There was no evidence of criminal activity, no illicit substances found, and no identifiable violation of the law. I see. And would you like to file a formal complaint? Yes. And Detective Morrison, there's something else you should know about this situation. Something that makes this case particularly interesting. Thompson finally realized something was wrong. Teenagers arrested for drug trafficking did not speak to internal authorities using precise legal terminology. They did not know detectives by name, and they definitely did not maintain such ICOM while describing police procedures with the precision of someone trained in the system. Kesha continued her phone conversation, each word calculated for maximum impact. Detective, I need you to understand that I am very familiar with the protocols for arrests related to controlled substances. Officer Thompson did not follow any of them. There was no observation of truly suspicious behavior, no attempt at proper identity verification, and certainly no probable cause for arrest. That's when Thompson tried to interrupt the call, but Kesha gently moved his hand away from the phone. Detective Morrison, the officer is now attempting to interfere with my legal call. Can you add that to the report? Detective Morrison's voice echoed loud enough for Thompson to hear. Miss Williams, stay on the line. I'm sending someone over there immediately. And Thompson, if you're listening to this, don't do anything else. Absolutely nothing. Thompson felt the blood drain from his face. How did an internal affairs detective know a teenager by name? How did she know the legal protocols so precisely? And why did her voice carry the authority of someone accustomed to being taken seriously by authorities? But Kesha's real preparation was just beginning. While Thompson tried to process what had just happened, she discreetly activated the voice recorder on her cell phone, a habit she had developed after years of listening to her father explain the importance of documenting evidence. Officer Thompson, she said calmly, still holding the phone with Detective Morrison on the line, I would like to give you an opportunity to explain your behavior. Why exactly did you arrest me? Thompson hesitated, suddenly aware that every word would be documented. You were acting suspiciously reading medications for a long time. For how long exactly? I didn't time it. But did you observe any illicit substances in my possession? No, but your attitude. What specific attitude? I can describe my conduct exactly. I entered the pharmacy, walked directly to the prescription counter, presented my ID to the pharmacist, and waited for my medication. What part of that constitutes criminal behavior? Each question was asked with the precision of an experienced prosecutor, and Thompson began to realize that he was being systematically dismantled by a teenager who clearly understood the legal system better than he did. In the hallway, other officers began to gather, drawn by the unusual drama of a criminal who seemed to be conducting her own interrogation. Officer Martinez whispered to a colleague, "This girl isn't normal. She talks like someone who grew up in law enforcement," added Officer Henderson, a 25-year veteran who finally recognized the familiar face. "My God, Thompson doesn't know what he's gotten himself into." Kesha noticed the growing audience and made her second strategic decision. It was time to plant the seed that would blossom into total destruction for Thompson. "Detective Morrison, are you still there? I want you to know that Officer Thompson also called me princess and suggested that my father is a criminal. He has shown clear racial bias throughout this arrest." Morrison's voice exploded through the phone. "He did what?" Thompson felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. Documented racial bias during an arrest without probable cause was the kind of scandal that not only ended careers but resulted in federal lawsuits. Morrison continued over the phone. "You are suspended effective immediately. Touch anything else, say another word, or even breathe in that girl's direction, and I will personally make sure you never wear a uniform anywhere again." But Kesha wasn't done yet. As Thompson stood there in shock, she looked him straight in the eye and said the words he would take years to forget. "Officer Thompson, there's something about my family you should know before it's too late to save what's left of your career." She paused dramatically, watching the panic grow in his eyes. "My father has a very strict policy about officers who display racial bias under his jurisdiction. When he finds out what happened here today, well, let's just say your next performance reviews are going to be particularly interesting." Thompson swallowed hard, finally beginning to understand that he had drastically underestimated the girl he thought was an easy victim, but he still didn't know the full extent of how catastrophically he had destroyed his own life. And Kesha, watching the first glimmer of real fear in the eyes of the men who had publicly humiliated her, knew that true justice was just beginning. "My father has a very strict policy on officers who demonstrate racial bias under his jurisdiction." Thompson felt something cold run down his spine. The way Kesha had said that with such confidence, as if she knew departmental policies intimately. His eyes studied the girl's face with growing desperation, searching for familiar signs he had completely overlooked. That was when the door to the room opened, and Captain Michael Williams entered, his impeccable uniform contrasting with the expression of controlled fury that Thompson had never seen before. The silence that followed was deafening. "Daddy," Kesha said calmly, still handcuffed. "I'm glad you're here. Officer Thompson was explaining the procedures for racially biased arrests to me." The word "dad" echoed through the room like a gunshot. Thompson felt his legs buckle as reality hit him with devastating force. The girl he had humiliated, handcuffed, and dragged through the police station was the daughter of his direct superior. Not just his boss, but the men who controlled his career, his future, his very professional survival, Captain Williams. I didn't know," Thompson stammered, his hands shaking visibly. "Clearly," the captain replied, his voice laden with a coldness that promised devastating consequences. "Detective Morrison informed me of the situation. It appears you decided to arrest my daughter for suspicious behavior which consisted of buying ibuprofen for her grandmother." Thompson tried to form a defense, but the words refused to come out. Around the room, other officers watched in awkward silence, some already beginning to physically distance themselves from Thompson as if his disgrace were contagious. "Dad, before you make any decisions, you need to hear this," Kesha said, activating the recording on her cell phone. Thompson's voice filled the room with crystal clarity. "I bet your father will be proud when he finds out his little girl has become a drug dealer. Or does he already know? Maybe it's a family business." Captain Williams closed his eyes for a moment, clearly calculating the magnitude of the disaster before him. When he opened them again, Thompson saw something that terrified him completely. It wasn't anger that shone there, but deep disappointment mixed with relentless determination. 23 years, the captain said slowly. 23 years building this department's reputation, fighting stereotypes, proving we can be better. And you destroyed all of that in 15 minutes of arrogance and racism." Kesha watched Thompson with the same scientific calm she had shown throughout the arrest. "Officer Thompson, would you like to know how I plan to proceed with this situation?" Thompson nodded desperately, clinging to any chance of salvation. "First, Detective Morrison has already launched a full investigation into your arrest patterns. We will find out how many other families you have traumatized with your behavior." Kesha spoke as if she were reciting a court sentence. "Second, this recording will be sent to all relevant civil rights organizations, ensuring that your conduct receives the attention it deserves. Please, Thompson begged, his voice breaking. I have a family. I need this job. You should have thought about that before assuming that a black teenager was automatically a criminal, Captain Williams interjected. And before you humiliated my daughter because you thought she didn't have the power to defend herself. Kesha continued methodically. Third, all the families you wrongfully arrested will be contacted by a civil rights attorney. They deserve to know that they have legal options against you and the department. Thompson tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. It wasn't just his career that was ending. It was his entire life being systematically dismantled by a teenager he had catastrophically underestimated. How? He muttered more to himself than anyone else. How did you know exactly what to do? Kesha smiled for the second time since the arrest, but this time the smile reached her eyes. I grew up hearing stories about cops like you over dinner. My dad always taught me that there are two ways to deal with abuse of authority. You can passively accept it, or you can document everything and use the system against those who pervert it. Officer Henderson, a veteran who had trained Captain Williams himself decades ago, slowly approached. Thompson, hand over your badge and your gun. Immediately, the final reality hit Thompson like a punch. His fingers trembled as he unbuttoned the badge he had worn with pride for 12 years. The cold metal weighed a ton in his hands as he handed it to Henderson. My career, Thompson whispered. Your career ended the moment you decided my daughter was guilty of the crime of being young and black in a drugstore, Captain Williams replied without pity. Kesha finally stood up, the handcuffs being removed by Rodriguez, who avoided eye contact with everyone present. Officer Thompson, there's one last thing I'd like you to know. Thompson looked at her, perhaps hoping for some final words of forgiveness or clemency. Throughout this entire process, you had multiple opportunities to stop, think, and acknowledge your mistake. Each time you chose to escalate the situation rather than back down, you were digging your own professional grave deeper. Kesha rubbed her wrists where the handcuffs had left marks. This isn't revenge. This is justice. And the difference is that justice doesn't depend on your remorse to be deserved. Thompson was escorted out of the police station 20 minutes later. His personal belongings in a cardboard box, his career in ruins, his reputation destroyed forever. In the parking lot, he looked back one last time at the building where he had worked for more than a decade. Through the window, he could see Kesha hugging her father, both smiling as they filled out paperwork for lawsuits that would ensure other officers would think twice before repeating Thompson's mistakes. The 17-year-old girl he had tried to humiliate had orchestrated his complete destruction with the precision of a surgeon and the patience of a military strategist. And the most bitter part of it all was that she had done exactly what she said she would do from the moment the handcuffs closed around his wrists. She had used the system to protect others like her. Thompson realized too late that he had underestimated not only Kesha, but all the power that comes from growing up understanding that justice is not something you wait to receive. It's something you learn to build with your own hands. As he drove away from the police station for the last time, one question haunted him. How many other people like Kesha were out there waiting patiently for someone like him to make the mistake of underestimating their strength, their intelligence, and their determination to turn injustice into power? 6 months later, Kesha Williams walked through the halls of the same police station where she had been humiliated, but this time as an intern in the police reform program her father had implemented after the Thompson scandal. The case had become national news. Thompson was convicted of civil rights violations and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Even more devastating, 17 other families came forward as victims of his prejudiced arrests, resulting in damages totaling over $2 million. Kesha, I have a special assignment for you today, Captain Williams said, handing her a folder. We need to review old cases of questionable arrests. Your perspective will be valuable. The irony did not go unnoticed. The girl Thompson had tried to destroy was now helping to reform the system that allowed officers like him to thrive. Every case reviewed, every procedure corrected, every training program implemented bore her mark. Thompson, for his part, discovered that prison was particularly cruel to former corrupt police officers. Isolated, despised even by common criminals, he spent his days reflecting on how a 15-minute decision had destroyed 2 decades of his life. His wife had left him. His children refused to visit him. The small apartment he managed to rent after losing his house was 3 blocks from a university where Kesha was now studying law on a full scholarship funded in part by the compensation he was forced to pay. "Dad always taught me that justice isn't about revenge," Kesha explained during a college lecture on police reform. "It's about transforming broken systems so that other people don't suffer what you suffered." In the audience, students of various ethnicities applauded enthusiastically. Some had similar stories. Families traumatized by police officers who abused their power. Entire communities that learned to fear those who were supposed to protect them. The reform program that emerged from Kesha's case was adopted by other cities. Arrest procedures were redesigned. Training on racial bias became mandatory. Body cameras were constantly monitored. Thompson had tried to use his badge to humiliate a teenager he considered defenseless. Instead, he unwittingly created one of the most powerful activists of her generation. When Kesha graduated from law school 3 years later, the graduation invitation arrived in the mailbox of the prison where Thompson was serving his sentence. He read about her academic awards, her acceptance to Harvard for a master's degree, her appointment to national police reform committees. The 17-year-old girl he had unjustly handcuffed had become exactly the kind of person he feared most, someone with real power for systemic change. Thompson learned too late that when you try to break someone out of prejudice, you sometimes end up forging exactly the kind of strength that will transform the world to ensure that people like you never again have the power to cause such pain. Kesha proved that the best revenge is not to repay cruelty. It is to build a future where such cruelty becomes impossible. If this story has inspired you to believe that one person can really make a difference, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that justice and intelligence always win out over prejudice and ignorance. Please like, share and subscribe. HOA Battelle.